I have a confession to make. I used to be a spreadsheet fanboy. I even had a client once tell me that spreadsheets were my superpower, which wasn't exactly what I dreamed of hearing when I was a kid watching X-Men and reading Marvel comics, but here we are. But then again, I digress. So let's get back on topic. Let me show you what happened in my last role when I tried to manage a complex, highly collaborative project in a spreadsheet. This was specifically the creation of a thought leadership white paper and supporting bill of materials. But first, a disclaimer. For this and all the other spreadsheet horror stories, know that these were real projects in real situations with real people. Only the names and specific details have been changed to protect the innocent and to not run afoul of IP violations. So, without further ado, let's take a look. All right, let's check the project plan for my 10-week project to create that thought leadership white paper. Pretty intense timeline, so there's not much wiggle room here. See some key dependencies, but I need to document those elsewhere. As I don't see a way to do that in my spreadsheet. Not a problem. I'll just go start a Word doc or something. And I can see we have a couple milestones behind us with these nice little orange asterisks. Pretty slick hack, if I do say so myself. All right, we're making good progress, but I see a few things are blocked. I wonder why. Let me go ahead and check the comments. Oh, so many comments. All right. Oh, looks like we haven't heard back from the client yet, putting the timeline at risk. All right. I'll add this to the agenda item for the next stand up. I don't see why this is blocked. I bet they sent me an email. All right. Let me go check my email. Okay, I'm back. It took about 30 minutes. Good use of my time there. Really efficient. Um, all right. I think I know why we're at risk here on the timeline, but what's this? Looks like somebody deleted my date field. Why can't they understand what to do? Now I need to give everyone the talk again in the next weekly stand up. Awesome. So, Ko, show us how Asana would have handled this differently.
Awesome. So we saw how painful it can be for real-time collaboration to happen in spreadsheets. So what I'm going to go over is how Asana can solve that. So we're going to pop on over to Asana, and we're going to go into a project where we're going to spend some time and come back to a few times during the course of today. So just again a quick overview. So when you're looking for specific things in a project, it's sometimes in a spreadsheet, it's really difficult to see dependencies or particular details or blockers, how long work is taking, what's changed, the discussions around the work. It's really difficult to find these things. Also, sometimes you need to do a lot of customization to end up with something that isn't even intuitive and then breaks down once several people get involved. So for Asana, real-time collaboration looks very different. And so what we're looking at here is example of a project that should be fairly straightforward, where we're doing a customer care fire chat and keynote presentation, and a bunch of different people are coming together. So over here, we've got some details on what the work is, who's doing it, when does it need to be done, the creation stage, hours required, approval stage, and a few other pieces of information that just gives us more context on what the work is about. And the work in this case is split by these swim lanes of all the different functions coming together to work on it. So foundational, the design team, systems architecture, web dev, legal compliance, product marketing, customer success, and so on. So that's the setup of how things are. So we're going to go into one of these items. So this no code AI Explorer for ML platform. And we're going to look at what is going on in here. So this is a task in Asana. We can see all the information about this particular task. We can see who's doing it, when it needs to be done. We can see some dependencies over here. And then we can also see that there are conversation topics happening. So there's discussions around the work. And we can also see, trailing all the way back to the beginning of when this task was created, we can see all the changes in the due dates. We can see what's called backlinks in Asana, which is where this particular task has been mentioned in other places. Those are just to highlight collaboration opportunities. And these changes also go for automation rules. We have automation rules that were set up in Asana, completely no code, made changes in this task, either updating due date, getting people involved. And when we're talking about people involved, This is where we have collaborators at the bottom. It's the people who are following along with this particular task and all its changes. We have a single task, just like this one, living in multiple projects at the same time. In this case, 6 projects. When there's changes in this particular action item, those changes update on all places in all those projects in Asana seamlessly without any additional work. For spreadsheets to be able to do that, it's nearly impossible and very challenging to make happen. People can also lock these actual custom fields so that not just anyone can go in and change them, giving you a little bit more data control. So now let's think about the case where you've got dozens or hundreds of these projects that you're involved in, right? How do we figure out what do we need to do? What are all the conversations going on? What are all the changes without having to go to every single project one by one? That's where the personal productivity suite comes into play. So we've got a homepage which consolidates all the action items across all your projects, portfolios, tasks, teams, what have you, just in one place where you can see all the things that you need to do in the near term, stuff that's overdue, completed, and also things that you've assigned to other people. So it gives you a little bit of involvement in the things you've delegated to others. We've got a My Task, which allows you to organize work in the way that makes the most sense to you. And then we've got an inbox where whenever there are updates, conversations, either by real people, by AI, which we'll get to a little bit in the near term, you can see all those updates just in one place. And so it really helps keep you up to date on everything that's going on around your work. I'm going to pass it back to Tim.
Yep. Thanks,
Yeah.
Coop. So what was invisible or scattered is now visible and consolidated, right in the context of the work versus buried in email or messaging apps, or even worse, personal meeting notes. It's so much more efficient, there's so much more clarity, and it's a better way to collaborate. So let's go on to the next fail, which is around customization. Now, spreadsheets are very customizable, but only if you know how. Much like the canvas and paint, in the hands of an artist, magic does happen. But for the rest of us who may not have the time or focus to read a 1,000-page plus Excel Bible, it's really just a reminder of the talents we don't have. You can easily create a list of tasks and add columns like start date, end date, owner, status, but forget about viewing it as a board or as a calendar. If you're a wizard at conditional formatting, like I used to be, maybe you can create a Gantt chart. But even a wizard can't stop other people from messing it up. So let's go back to that project plan for the development of a thought leadership marketing campaign and supporting bill of materials to see how this played out. Okay, my client is more visual in nature, so spent a couple hours creating this slick timeline Gantt view over here. Let me go ahead and fix that overwritten due date. Nice, look at that automation. Luckily, I excel at conditional formatting and complex formulas. All it took was 10,000 hours in spreadsheets, just what I wanted to do when I was a kid. Memorize spreadsheet hacks on popular at happy hours. Unfortunately, all it meant was that now I'm responsible for all our templates and spreadsheet problems. At least it's job security. Gantt charts looking good. No issues to troubleshoot. Why does this say in progress when we're not in progress? What prankster changed that? I wish I could just automate it based on the start date. It's probably a way with a complex formula, but who has the time for that? Let me go ahead and change that back. Nice. Feeling really productive and efficient today. Oh no, the client has to see this in a calendar view. I'm gonna have to go to Google to figure out how to do that in the spreadsheets. Okay, here we go. This should only take me an hour or so. Not too bad. In the meantime, let me just go ahead and take a screenshot of the scan chart and drop it into an email for the client. I know they're not going to open this and try to make sense of this spreadsheet, so let me make it easy for them. Over to you, Ku. Let's see how Asana makes this so much easier and efficient.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. So what we just saw again was how difficult it can be to help others visualize the work in a way that makes sense to them or in a way that's more amenable to the actual nature of the work that needs to be done. And it's really not best done in a spreadsheet many times or spreadsheet-like tools. There's also a lot of things that spreadsheets miss, like dependencies and a lot of other pieces of information that are very critical at times. So the way Asana handles this is we've had a long-term focus on giving people a lot of flexible ways to visualize their work, and allowing people to adapt how they view things based on the actual work or the people they're working with at that time. So every action item, for example, on this list view that we were on earlier, corresponds to a card on this board view, which to some people will look familiar. It's a Kanban board, which corresponds to a brick on this timeline view, which we'll come back to. Each of these views has their own superpower, which corresponds to lines on the Gantt view, and also items on a calendar view. So we're going to go through each of these views to talk a little bit more about what makes each of them special, because each of them has their own purpose. So for instance, if we want to actually abstract ourselves away from all the nitty-gritty details, say we're discussing with leadership, we have a dashboard view. This is built completely no code, it's drag and drop, point and click. But there's a active living and breathing dashboard that updates based on how the work changes in this particular project, which allows us to really cut through the complexity of having to use a spreadsheet based platform or spreadsheets to create these dashboards, which can be quite cumbersome. The Gantt view, for example, is really effective for managing durations and understanding how long specific pieces of work are taking. We can grab the edges of any of this work and move it back and forth, and it'll automatically update these durations, or I can even change these durations and it'll automatically update the actual task itself, as we saw there. So there's also a few other unique capabilities. For those of you who are a little less familiar with traditional Gantt charts, there's a capability that Gantt originally got famous for called baselining, which is where I can actually see for a given project, can I visualize where tasks were on a given date, in this case, September 15th. So I can see here, I brought this back post, is where, zoom out a bit, and I can see that for each of these tasks that are here, I get a sense that on September 15th, these tasks were all earlier. So even though it looks like we're not past due on any work here, it's evident that the entire project in and of itself just got delayed for whatever reason. And now we can see information like that, which in spreadsheets we might not have been able to. Now, if we go to the timeline view is really beneficial to view dependencies and how long things are taking in a lot of flexible ways. We have all the different types of dependencies, finish to start, start to start, and all the others. And this is where you can say, okay, if this particular task got done a little bit later, how is it impacting the dependencies? And it'll shift the entire project just a little to accommodate for no dependencies being broken. Of course, it's also very easy to actually add a task in here and then also connect dependencies from existing tasks to the new tasks that I've created. So now, we need to worry about how everything syncs together. So any changes I made on this view automatically sync to all the other views in Asana. So board view, as you probably are aware of, is really good for moving things back and forth, much more suited towards agile projects. And then we can come back to our list view. So again, all the changes we made in other views also update here automatically. So now if we try and imagine, okay, say we've got dozens, hundreds of projects like this, how do we visualize the progress of what's going on without having to go into each and every single project? So that's where higher level views, like what we have called universal dashboards, comes into play, where we can create one dashboard that sits on top of all these projects and portfolios and whatnot. And as things are changing in those projects, everything updates here live. So you never need to go into those specific projects to get an update on how things are going. And Asana has tons of these types of visualizations. For example, we also have workload and capacity management. So for instance, over at this one, for instance, we can actually visualize how, let's say, a specific function or collection of teams, what the workload looks like. You can hover over any single person's monthly count and see what is taking them above that workload capacity. Of course, privacy and confidentiality layered on top of this. So these kind of customized views don't really take any amount of effort, and creating this in spreadsheets would have probably taken a few years maybe, but in Asana, they are standard and they just come with the platform natively. So that's a little bit about how we can solve the problem that Tim talked about.
Yeah, thanks, Ko. I like to say with Asana, it's like every project manager is your best project manager. There's no need to burn out the resident expert. Things just work intuitively for everyone with no code or custom development. It's almost like Asana's spent mountains of money in R&D to get this right for you all, to make it easy. Now, Let's go to the next fail. And most projects and programs are complex enough on their own, but spreadsheets turn that complexity into chaos. Why? Because every project manager has their own preferred approach and templates, because they want what works for them. They like to optimize locally for how they work without fully understanding the implications to global efficiency across teams or org wide. So we're going to go back to the white paper project. We were actually producing a series of these white papers and supporting content as part of the engagement, not just one. So let's see how it played out. Okay, back to that weekly status report for the client. Let me check on the progress of the other white paper we're developing as part of this program. Ah, this delivery manager decided to use their own template. At least they ported over the tasks. Why can't they just use the template I provided? And I have to figure out how to roll this up. Just what I wanted to be doing on a Friday afternoon. I do like the ability to set a milestone, though. I think I'm going to steal that one. I see they prefer not yet started as opposed to not started. Big innovation there. Given we're using the same editor on both white papers, I'm sure they're going to have fun navigating this as well. And those legal workstream tasks are the same. I wish there was a way to keep them in sync versus having to duplicate them, as now I need to make sure I'm not double counting the hours worked against that task. I really don't understand what they mean by priority. All the work's essential here. I'm also not sure what these phases are in the work stream, or what a health of 1 or zero point 0.5 means, or trend for that matter. And it looks like they didn't create a Gantt chart in their template. I guess I'll have to do that myself now. Time to set up a meeting. I hope they're available, as I need to get this report out by end of day. All right. Cool. Show us how Asana handles scaling complexity far more effectively.
Awesome. So, a little bit of a backstory. So, Asana has scaled with many, many companies all over the world just to help them keep up the momentum of how they're operating, what they're doing. And there's a single company where they've got over 200,000 active weekly users using Asana around the globe. So that's where it becomes really important to just be able to maintain speed and responsiveness of a platform like this, even with hundreds of thousands of users. So what we're looking at here is a project for a new hardware product launch and roadmap process. So what we're going to see here is that this project is quite basic. We've just got, the work that needs to be done, the people who are going to do them, and the due date. So, what if we want to take really nice approaches to managing these projects and taxonomy and automation rules and things like that, and we want to scale it to other projects? So that's where this particular capability of Asana comes in, called bundles, where we can actually go into this library of bundles that have been created. And a bundle is essentially just a collection of certain custom fields, automation rules that are already pre-built, which somebody has built, again, completely no code, and also task templates. And we can essentially just apply that particular bundle to variety of projects. And this has actually been used at some companies to be able to update and scale project management processes, taxonomy, automation rules, and more to sometimes hundreds of projects without having to go into each one individually. So now we can see that this particular project has a lot more details here, where you have like estimated and actual hours, and there's automatic formulas, which are going to do a bunch of calculations. And you have status markers where you can say something's either not started, currently planning. And if I mark something as at risk or blocked, it'll trigger an automation rule, which says, okay, this item was marked at risk or blocked. We're going to trigger that automation rule that's already pre-built and say, okay, here's the people who get tagged on this, just so they can help us move this particular project forward. Now, for example, if we want to look at how do automation rules and bundles help with cross-functional collaboration, a theme we talked about earlier today, let's say we want to look at the marketing campaign plan, and we go here and we update this key function to marketing and creative. Now you'll see that there's already pre-built automation rules, which takes this task and multi-homes it not only between this project, but also another project where the global creative production team is working out of it in a central fashion, adds a few more custom fields. We want AI can also autofill a lot of these fields, and it tags people adds a specific set of collaborators so that people are always following along with the work that has now been introduced for this particular function. So that's how bundles really comes into play to help scale things. But now, what if we want to go a step further? So what if we want to say, okay, everything's in here, but I don't want to have to go and fill in all these custom fields myself. AI can now do some of that for you. So what I'm going to do is just say, hey, AI, like, can you help fill in these custom fields based on your knowledge of which function needs to do these specific things? And it's going to go in, it's going to look at any details available in these tasks, conversations, comments, attachments, what have you, and update these on its own. And now, as these changes are made here, everything that's connected to it, the dashboards, the multi-homing, everything updates automatically on its own. No having to send any additional emails or ping people saying, hey, we've put something on the docket for the marketing and creative team. Can you take a look at it? None of that needs to happen. It's all happening from Asana as a centralized system. And the other thing that's really important to mention here, like we've been talking about when it comes to scale, is what happens when you've got dozens or hundreds of these types of projects. How does that operate? How did you view it in a consistent fashion? That's where portfolios comes into play. So portfolios is just a really easy way to say, okay, we've got a collection of projects, and single project can also live in multiple portfolios at the same time. And we can see a lot of information about those projects. So we can see our earlier project is here, and there's a bunch of others, and we can see, okay, for each of these, what's the most recent status update? What are the milestones that we've hit, missed, and that we have upcoming? What is the general duration of this project, other custom fields, metadata, estimated project budgets, and not only information at this layer, but also data that's actually being rolled up from that project layer that we were at up to this particular layer. All happening automatically, no need to work with spreadsheets or complex kind of formulas and things like that. Like it all happens pretty seamlessly here. And I think it's important to mention that a lot of this highly responsive software and interconnectedness is only possible because Asana has for a very long time focused on underlying technical infrastructure optimization and building things in a way that scales really well from an engineering perspective. So all these features needs extremely concurrent and responsive technological approaches, which is why when things change in one place, they automatically update in others. And you're not having to worry about, like with spreadsheets, we used to have to worry about this quite a bit, which is if we're working on a collective spreadsheet, who hits save first? Where does the save get pushed? Like, and whose changes got saved first? Which version is the latest one? We don't have to worry about any of that here. That's how Asana solves that particular problem.
Ah, I, I wish Asana was there 10 years ago for me, but unfortunately it was not. But what we do now with Asana is balance standardization at scale with the freedom each individual needs to work at their most efficient. Because work is hard enough, tracking and reporting on it at scale shouldn't have to be as well. All you need is a purpose-built platform for complex cross-functional work with a consumer-grade UI that makes it easy to use, which is Asana. So, well, let's shift to the next pain point, data silos. As I mentioned earlier, we lose 9 hours a week just searching for information in our spreadsheets and other tools. It's like spreadsheets are where people hide the data. And I used to call SharePoint an email where people would hide the content. Everything required digging through a sea of information to find what you were looking for. And even then, as Ku mentioned, was it the most recent version? You don't know. So let me show you what happened when a key team member left in the middle of that critical thought leadership project. Well, looks like that delivery manager just left the project. Why didn't anyone tell me? That was so abrupt. Can't say that I'm surprised by looking at this template. It looks like they never added the documentation to our shared drive. Let me dig through my email and see if I can find that project brief for the specific white paper. Okay, here it is. This is just the blank version. How can I find it? I'm probably just better off recreating it. Same for the RACI. I'm going to need it to ramp that new delivery manager ASAP. I guess I'll never know what they meant by health or trend. I should just build a new spreadsheet from scratch using my original template. There goes my evening. I just hope I was CC'd on that last email to the client about the constrained task to know where things are. I'd hate to start over with them and bug them to get an update from the client, given how tight the timelines are. I wish there was just a simpler way to keep all the important documentation and communications in one place. Even better if I had a dedicated comms lead for all work streams just to ask them. The budgets are tight, and it's not like there's a free resource available 24/7 at my beck and call. Good thing I have my trusty spreadsheets, though. They really are the best solution I know of for managing these types of programs despite their shortcomings. All right. Now, Coop, let's see how Asana solves this data silo problem.
Awesome. So let's actually go back to one of our original projects, the ML and customer care or fireside chat. And let's see, if we wanted to get information like what Tim was looking at with that project way back when, where do we get it? There's an overview tab in Asana. So this is where we get a project description. We get to see the specific roles of the people who are playing a part in this project. We can see, and we'll get to this in the next section, which goals at the either function, team, company level this particular project is connected to. We can also see what were the recent status updates. And we can also see this AI generated project summary for us, which says, okay, here is a project summary for the time that you have not really taken a look at this particular project. And I can have this rerun and update if I'd like, just to get an updated perspective on what's going on with this project. So there's very quick ways to get this information right off the bat. And what if we want to go deeper? So what if we want someone who we can ask questions to who has a lot of knowledge about this particular project? Let's imagine the case where you're working with someone who's managing a project, you're only loosely involved with it, and that other person is the one who's really running the project, knows the nitty-gritty. Let's say, for example, they are unavailable and they're on vacation for a couple of weeks. You didn't know about it, and now you're stuck not getting answers for your particular project. That's where Asana's Smart Chat comes into play. Asana's Smart Chat is where right here at the top right, there are questions that I've asked the AI, which we're just going to run through. And Smart Chat actually allows us to quickly ask questions that might be pretty complicated and where the AI will take into account everything that's in this project, if that's the context that we want. And also it'll take into account the discussions, the data information, the even images that are in the actual tasks. It can read the content in those images too, to an extent. So let's look at what's going on here, right? So let's look at some of these questions that we've asked just a couple of days ago. We're doing that because we don't want to have you wait 2 or 3 minutes for me to get an answer from the AI, because it does take just a little bit of time to process this vast portion of information. So here the question that we've asked is, hey, is there anything in this project where the estimated hours seemed unusually low? And the AI, what it did was it went through all the information and actually surfaced the insight saying, yes, there actually were 4 items where the estimated hours seemed unusually low. And so it's even saying things like, hey, this task should require 10 hours, but it's actually logged as 0. And then it's saying this one is where, it currently has 2 hours, but closer estimate should be 4 to 6 hours. And it's doing this based on past work and based on its own knowledge, which it's using in places where it doesn't know things. And we can click on these things and it'll take us to that actual work or those tasks. So if I do this to open that work, move this chat aside so I can still get this context while looking at the work itself. So now if we want to look at some of the other questions that we asked, a little more simple question where what are the risks with this particular project? Very simple question that PMs get bombarded with quite often from a bunch of different people who don't seem to talk to each other. But now this is where 24/7, even at 3 a.m., if somebody has a question about some particular project, this especially comes into play where you're looking at teams that are distributed around the world, but they're not working in the same time zone. We can ask questions and get quick answers. The other valuable part of this is that we've been seeing, even for Asana Power users, the reliance on regular search, that's up here, the search bar where you're trying to find work, that seems to have gone down a little bit because they are now starting to use AI to find work because it can understand much broader context without us having to get the spelling and the specific things right. So for example, I can ask it a very general question saying, hey, is there any work where any of these 3 integrations are being worked on? And it's pulling up all of the mentions where that particular integration is being worked on. It doesn't matter which project portfolio it's in, provided I have access to it, it's going to pull those up. And then I asked it, can you give it to me in a tabular format? The reason is because sometimes the people that we're working with aren't as advanced as us and are still stuck in kind of looking at spreadsheets, and the AI can do that for us. Copy paste, very easy to work with. And so these are just a few examples of where finding things becomes easier. A couple last examples where, say, for example, you have a team of people where you're not the only one responsible for doling work out to them. You just want to make sure that they're not getting overwhelmed. And the people who give work to them aren't all in the same room or can hop on a call in the near term. This is where you can ask the AI saying, hey, I want to make sure these people are not overwhelmed. Can I get a glimpse of all the stuff that they have going on in the next 7 days? And provided you have access to it, it'll say, here's what they have going on. And you can start to understand some of these things on a qualitative basis. Of course, if you want a more quantitative answer, that's where workload and capacity management, one of the views that we looked at earlier, will come into play. So, you know, this is just, scratching the surface of a few of the things that Asana has with AI. One last one before I wrap up this topic is where, let's say, for instance, the person who manages this entire portfolio of work is unavailable. Either they've left the company or they've changed functions or they're really busy. It could be any of those things. That's where we now have the ability to have an AI actually write status updates that look exactly like this. So this status update is written by an AI. So I can do things like I can say, hey, request status update, have an AI write it. And we can even run one of those. But just a quick glimpse of what this is, it'll actually look through all the information, look at the time frame that you've specified, and say, okay, here's the blockers, here's the people involved, the milestones, and all these other pieces of information. And even if we give it no guidance whatsoever, it'll look at how were the last three status updates done, and it'll do it within the same frame of that status update. And doing this is really easy. You just say update status. You can just say, based on your gut feel, you can pick a status. You can say draft with AI, pick a time frame. Let's say I want to do it from the beginning of the year till now. No guidance given, draft the update, and the AI is going to do its magic. While I let that happen, and the intent of a lot of these is not to replace people. It's just so that the work life becomes easier, and then also your personal life becomes easier, because especially getting pings after hours, getting pings while you're out on leave, vacation, those things are kind of stressful, and that really hampers the work-life balance. And so a lot of these pieces of functionality and these capabilities are meant to make both sides of your life just a little bit easier. Right on time, 2 to 3 minutes. This is the AI status update that I created. I can edit this, post that update, and we're good to go. And you can run dozens of these status updates all side by side and then hit send on all of them. It'll remember who got the status update last time. Let's give the same people that status update this time, plus maybe a few more that you might want to add.
Hmm.
Awesome.
I love that. I would have saved me a ton of time, but unfortunately didn't have it. And it's clear that with Asana, everything is at your fingertips. All you need to do is ask Asana AI at any time, whether your teammates are working or not. Because I am a morning person. Not everybody's a morning person. And so I'm not usually up late. This saves me time, doesn't keep me up late. Now, let's go to the last example, what I call where goals go to hide. For this last example, we're going to leave the thought leadership white paper program behind, thankfully. Let me show you what happened when my team was hired by the leadership of a company I'll just call Pop Culture Inc. to help with their strategic planning. We hosted a 2-day offsite, generated ideas based on OKRs, generating a whole list of projects and initiatives aligned to those strategic focus areas. I then manually had to bucket each project under the goal it supported, and they typically spanned multiple goals because work is never that neat and tidy. And that meant that my grading was, I'll call manual and qualitative. And you'll see what I mean when we show the video. Let's see that spreadsheet, Koo. Okay. The 2-day offsite with Pop Culture Inc. has been successfully delivered, and I just have hundreds of Post-its to go through now. Time to synthesize it all together. Now it's time for what I call the data art, because it's definitely not data science. It's way too subjective for that. But that's why my team and I get paid the big bucks. Let's map all the details into my trusty spreadsheet. I like to go bottoms up. So first, all the potential projects. Now I'll bucket them into, let's just call them attributes, because it could be a channel, a category, a region, could be a lot of things. And each of those tie to an initiative, which in turn tie to one of their 3 OKRs. All right, crushed it. but some of the projects could tie to multiple OKRs. So I'll just mark them here. Not sure how to visualize and track this though, but that's not my problem. Execution will be in a different set of spreadsheets. I'll let the transformation delivery team figure that out. I'm just mapping the goals, initiatives, and projects. It's not like this will be a live system of record. That just doesn't exist. So back to summarizing this, as it's pretty ugly and hard to understand. Even though I love spreadsheets, it is the truth. So I know I'm going to use a pivot table. That'll make it easy to see. Ah, brilliant. People can't figure this out. That's their problem. It's clear as day to me. I just hope they don't ask me to report on this quarterly, as that'll be what I like to call a non-trivial amount of work. But I'm going to mark this one as complete. All right. Now, Ku, show us how Asana connects goals to the actual work and provides a beautiful visual map of goals and objectives in the underlying work.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. So, as we saw Tim kind of going through that exercise, I feel like a lot of us have lived through it where it's so painful to have people go through this process at the beginning, at the end of a quarter, where they're collecting, okay, here's the goals, here's where we are with those goals, here's where we are benchmarking ourselves, here's the links to all the supporting work, here's the stuff that was on track, that's behind. The amount of coordination it takes, bringing people together, live meetings, emails running back and forth, it's just a lot of work. And so, how does Asana solve for that? So, Asana has a part of our product called goals, where you can visualize, okay, right at the top, what are the strategic priorities of the company? And let's say, for example, for one of these strategic priorities, we can see what are the sub goals that are kind of powering that particular strategic priority or that goal. So we can see not only what those sub goals are, but we can see the sub goals of those sub goals. And we can also see which are the functions that own it, be sales, finance, product engineering, finance, mid-marketing, marketing, mid-marketing, tongue twister. And then we can also see for each of these goals, what is the numerical metric we're using to track it and how far along are we? So in a given time frame, we can measure things based on specific numbers, either done or not done. Or you can say absolute number or percentages, 0 to 100, or fractional percentages, where you're trying to make a small incremental change in, let's say, a profit margin or a cost of acquisition of customer. And that cost of acquisition of customers might be in dollar values per acquisition, or hundreds of thousands, or again, millions of dollars. You can have all of that available in Asana being tracked, and we can also see who specifically in that organization is responsible for that particular goal. But this view is much more simplified. So when Asana came out with this, we quickly became the number one OKR and goal platform based on real user reviews on G2 Crowd. And that was even before we came out with what's called our strategy map. So this strategy map is just a much more intricate but real way of visualizing everything that we just talked about when it comes to goals and the work and things like that. And where we can see, okay, for a given strategic priority 3, which is what we were digging into, we can see that there's 9 things linked to it. We can open that. We can see all the sub goals, which of course we can keep cascading down and opening. And we can also see over here the portfolio of work that was connected and also the project that we were in earlier. So now when leaders are trying to understand how is the work that's happening at the grassroots level of the organization all the way up to their particular leadership level, how is all that work laddering up to their goals and how are their goals cascading down to the actual work? This is where we are able to now see that in a much more intuitive way. And we can even click into any one of these goals. And in this case, we can see that we can see who owns it, what's the time period, how far along are we. We can see there's a lot of status updates and tracking. We can see the narrative that has been written about this particular goal, who's involved. And if we want, we can even see that Irene here has been kind enough to link a dashboard for us where we can pop it open and see what is the status of all the work that's happening that's specifically tied to these goals. And we can now see a living, breathing, always up to date visual of how everything is going with those goals. So this is the way in which Asana has been able to make goal and OKR management much easier to do at companies of all shapes and sizes. Awesome. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ko.
So it's clear that with Asana, you can go from tracking project outputs to business outcomes. And that way you can answer, is this the right work? Does everyone know why it's the right work and how they contribute to it? What is the current status now, not in a month or a month or two at the end of a manually pieced together QBR? And Asana can do this because it was purpose built to answer the question, who's doing what by when, how, and why? Because ultimately, if you could run your business and optimize your operations on a spreadsheet, you would, but you can't. It's why CWM, Collaborative Work Management, and OKR tools emerged in the first place. We just bring them together in Asana. Spreadsheets just aren't flexible enough, visually engaging enough, or easy enough to keep up with the pace and complexity of modern work.